Well, everyone, thanks for stopping by another episode of the Announcers Hour podcast. I'm your host, Patrick McCall. Today we have Joel Norman on the podcast today and another guy in that West Coast League circuit that we all just got out of throughout the summer. And so Joel can definitely speak on a lot. And Joel, I'm wondering how you doing?
Doing well, Patrick. We just said a moment ago, nice to finally kind of meet this way. We texted a little bit before, but obviously still haven't met in person because somehow Ridgefield and Wenatchee haven't played each other since 2019.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch the WCL kind of mix up the scheduling. I know there's some matchups that don't happen every year now. So, but I mean, I'm wondering with Wenatchee just wrapped up another season, can you kind of explain to people that, your responsibilities for that organization throughout the past year?
Sure thing. My primary role, as you might expect, is going to be the play-by-play broadcast for the team and also just run pretty much all communications, social media pages, website, send out a weekly newsletter as well. Pretty much any type of communications that come from the team, I'm in charge of that. So it's nice. I've been able to kind of expand that role a little bit in my time with the team. I added a podcast a few years ago where I kind of just gave recaps of each game and played a lot of interviews. I've been able to add on a few interns to help out, and I don't really know if it's something that's become one of my responsibilities, but kind of stuff that goes on our scoreboard, I tend to have a lot of say in. I think it's just because we got a brand new scoreboard in 2021, and it was kind of like, what do we want to do with this thing? And I had an interest in what would go up on there, so I've been able to have kind of oversee interns who largely do a lot of that work. But yeah, basically the main communications director roles you would expect of the baseball team. But it's certainly a fun way to spend the summer for sure, though, in the West Coast League.
And so, I know you're also doing the play-by-play. So what was that like for you? And are you responsible for like all home and road?
Yeah, I do home and road games, which is a blessing in this league because unfortunately, in recent years, a lot of teams aren't sending broadcasters on the road the way they used to. I started with the AppleSox in 2018, and the league I think only had, I want to say about 12 or 13 teams at that time, and most of the teams who had a broadcaster would travel. There were only a couple who did it. I remember Victoria didn't, and they still don't travel. I think Portland did travel that year. They don't anymore. But for whatever reason, at post pandemic, I understand probably teams trying to cut costs a little bit. They haven't sent their broadcasters on the road. And, as biased as it may be with our opinion, obviously, I think that's a mistake. I think you're missing that opportunity to have your home voice go on the road to experience what goes into calling games on the road as well. So I'm really grateful that I've been able to do that all 6 seasons with the AppleSox home and road games. And frankly, I couldn't really imagine a baseball season without also calling road games in that.
Yeah, I know I was one of the lucky few to also travel on the road this season. I certainly had a lot of fun doing it. And, for those that don't know, Wenatchee obviously got to the championship game and this out of the North Division playing the South Portland Pickles, end up winning it all. So what was that atmosphere like at Walker Stadium?
It was about what you would expect. A lot of people on our team had not been there before. We hadn't been there as a team since 2021, and I knew going in it was going to be loud. I knew there'd be a lot of energy. There always is. They do such a good job of putting on a show there, and it certainly was. And I think it definitely. I think it's safe to say I can't speak for our players, but from the way the performance went, it definitely rattled the team. Probably took them about 3 or 4 innings to get used to it. There are some places where your public address announcer is very involved, and there's other places where there aren't. Now, I think there's a debate on how involved they should be sometimes, but the point is there was a really good environment, very energy driven, and very home field oriented for the Pickles. That's the reason why they won 20 games at home this season. So that was definitely a factor in that game, but it was neat because early on, it felt like, okay, this has a chance to really get away from us with how the crowd's rocking. The team is that the Pickles, that is, were thriving off of it. It felt like early on there was a chance the game could get away, but the AppleSox really battled second and third innings. They tied up, had a few different clutch 2 out base hits, and that was, I think that game was one of the best baseball games I've ever called. It's up there as a top three for sure because of the mixture of the environment, the dramatic ending, even though if it went unfortunate from the team I was covering. But it was such a special West Coast League title game. I'm sure the league is still beaming about how it went, just with the back and forth battle, great crowd, great atmosphere, and It was good. It was a lot of fun. Like I said, I really wish it had gone the other way, but it was such a fun memory that with time, I'm appreciating a little bit more now that it's getting a little bit further away from the pain of when we first lost.
Yeah, I know. And congratulations to the Pickles. They won their first South Division title and also broke up a seven straight winning streak for the Corvallis Knights, who had won the last seven prior to their loss there in the championship, or I should say semifinal in the South. But it was a crazy atmosphere. And do you have any exchange at all with Mike Checks? I know you're right next to obviously Portland's broadcaster there in the booth.
Yeah, I talked to Mike quite a bit before the game, and then I remember when the game ended, Mike said uh, it was funny because the game ended, and as you know, it was a walk off for Portland. So there was a lot of celebration, and there was that moment where I go off air, where you're kind of taking a moment to kind of still take in what just happened. The shock of it. We were an out away from winning it all. So I remember just kind of leaning back. I was up against the wall, and the next thing I knew, I heard a click in my headset, and the power actually went off in the press box. I don't know how many people outside of our fans and Portland fans know that because I didn't get a chance to do a post game show because the power went off with all the excitement because the Pickles stormed out of their dugout. They're mobbing on each other on the field. Fans came running out of the stands. I mean, it was an unbelievable atmosphere. All of a sudden, you're like, "What is going on?" And then the power goes out. And I'll never forget Mike's reaction to it because I took off my headset. I kind of looked at him because I'm just kind of like, what's next? What do we do? Like, is this coming back on? And he just his reaction was so simple. He looked at all the other employees in the box and he was just like, he said, "Leave your stuff, go down on the field and celebrate. Everything will be here when you get back. Go have a great night." And I kind of love that. I was like, you know what? He could have been really frustrated in that moment and been like, "What the heck? How did our power go out?" But he was just like, "Hey, we just won a championship. I'm gonna enjoy it." So that's the image. Besides seeing the walk off happen, I mean, that's the other image I remember. It's just Mike's calmness in the moment. It was just so funny the way that he reacted in that moment.
Yeah, and I was and I remember looking at the winning call and everything. It was great, and also a hectic atmosphere and everything. And so, you're also with the Lincoln Stars, if I'm not mistaken. And so, do
Mhm.
you have any prior stops to being in Wenatchee and Lincoln?
So Wenatchee was my first job out of college, and it's just become a really easy place to go back to. I got out of school in 2018, and I joined Wenatchee. Boy, that would have been 2 weeks after graduation. Yeah, because I remember I graduated, went home for a week, packed up my stuff, moved, and then went out to Washington. So I did that first season with the AppleSox, stayed with the team for two off seasons where I did sales with the team. I remember listening to Chris's podcast, and in a lot of ways, I had a similar situation where I did a couple of years of sales with the team. And then I kind of got to a point, it would have been early 2020. I was thinking, hey, I think I'm ready to make that next move. I know it's not that I don't want to do sales anymore. It's that I want to make the next push in my career. And I applied for and accepted a broadcasting assistant position with the Fredericksburg Nationals, who were moving from Potomac, Maryland to Fredericksburg, Virginia, and retaining their single A status with the Washington Nationals. And I was driving across the country when the world shut down with the pandemic. This would have been mid March of 2020. And I remember being in Wyoming when the NBA shut down. I was driving through a snowstorm that night, and then I get out of the car and I see, hey, the NBA shut down, and then every other league pretty much did shortly after that. So that was really strange, and I spent the rest of 2020 and early 2021 kind of just back home, which was Pennsylvania, because I was already on my way across the country. The original plan was to stop in Pennsylvania, then head south to Virginia. Stayed in Pennsylvania, thinking we'll wait this out, and then got told in the early spring, hey, it's not going to happen. We're going to have to cut your position for this year with Fredericksburg. So I thought, okay, now what? I really don't want to spend another year not broadcasting. So I just reached out to the AppleSox by chance, and they were fortunately willing to bring me back on. And after the 21 season, the plan was I was going to go back into sales. And I had a day or two, kind of around this time, late August of 2021, where I was sitting around, baseball season had ended, and I just remember having a realization one day where I was like, I'm not doing sales again, at least not for the next couple of years. I don't want to do that right now. And I just started applying to random junior hockey jobs across the country. And I said, whatever I get offered, I'm going to take because I need to do this. I need to try and see if I can find some other broadcasting in the course of the year because I had previously done high school sports in the off season. And what I enjoyed the high school sports because it filled that void. But the downside for me was you didn't really have that team aspect. You weren't traveling with the team. I didn't feel like I was getting to know the players as well. And that made it harder for me with my call because I didn't have a chance to learn a lot of those inside stories. When I did high school, I did 3 years of high school football. And what that entailed basically was leaving work at about between 2:30 to 4, and then usually driving at least an hour north to try and go call a game somewhere. And I just basically showed up, an hour before that game started, called it, packed up everything, left, and then went home. So again, filled the void, but it was also very mercenary, like where I was just kind of showing up for a quick job. So I got into junior hockey. I took a job in Iowa. That worked out. It was it was rough in the sense where that was one of the coldest. It might have been the coldest winter I ever had, and it was not a very high paying job. But I wasn't going for that. I was going for the opportunity, and I remember it really helped pay off because I went back to the AppleSox, and then that off season I got offered a job here in Lincoln. So it was a blessing to get that because the team I was working with in Iowa, for those who aren't super familiar with junior hockey, there are 3 tiers under USA Hockey, and the team in Iowa was on the third tier, so the lowest one. I got the team I'm with right now is a tier 1 team, so it was a real blessing to be able to get offered that chance to kind of jump up 2 levels, so to speak. So, and then this is I guess we have a game next week, so this will be my third season here in Lincoln, and it's been nice to have 2 organizations to kind of have that kind of long-term history with. Granted, I wish they were a little bit closer and not 2 time zones apart from each other, but it's a like I said, it's a blessing to be able to call 2 sports that I love over the course of the year in hockey and baseball.
Yeah, I know it's a good situation to be in and something a little different than I think some other prior guests. I know some guys are going, team to team to team next year, but you've been locked in a little bit more. And so, I'm also wondering off that point, like, did you do any broadcasting in school and how much did you get like experience before jumping in with Wenatchee and Lincoln?
When I went to school, I knew I wanted to do 2 things. I really wanted to broadcast, and I really wanted to be a sports reporter, like with our student-run newspaper. I really enjoyed writing. I don't get to do it as much besides game recaps and game previews. I really enjoy feature articles, but I realized early on in college, it was going to be hard to get a job that lasted with writing. So I really put my focus in on broadcasting, which was always a love, but it was always, I went into school being like, I'm going to figure out which one of these two is a little more realistic. I got involved my freshman year with our student radio station. I jumped on with them. I remember it was our baseball team because I joined my second semester. I did a lot of stuff with our baseball team because we called baseball games. And being a freshman, it's not like they were going to put me on the mic immediately. So the big thing that they did for me was we had a position basically we just called it Twitter, where you were going to tweet out, live updates from the game. And the cool part about it was you got to be at the park for the game. The downside for me was I wasn't on the mic. I wanted to be calling the game. So I remember thinking with how many people there were with the team, I thought, a good way for me to maybe move up into a role where I could do some more broadcasting would be to just kind of be everyone's best friend with this situation. So what I started doing from that Twitter position was I started writing out stats from the game that I noticed. I would kind of do some research on the fly where I'd be like, hey, this guy's hitting 334 when batting with runners in scoring position in 2 outs. And then I'd slide that over to the color commentator. It wasn't to be like, I didn't want them to pat me on the back or anything. And sometimes they wouldn't. It was great, like on air, they'd be like, hey, hats tip to Joel Norman, our statistician, so to speak. But I just wanted to kind of show that, like, hey, I'm really interested in this and I have a true passion for covering baseball in general. So I did stuff like that and it ended up working out because one of the kids who was my age, but had already gotten on air because he had been there a little bit longer than I had. I remember him calling me in the off season and he was like, hey, when baseball starts up next fall and we're calling games, he's like, you're my guy. You and I are going to alternate play by play all year. And we're just gonna do every game together. And I was like, works for me. That's what I wanted to do. And it was really fun because my sophomore year, he and I got a chance. to go down to Oklahoma City to cover the Big 12 championship. And our school, West Virginia, actually made it to the Big 12 championship game. So I remember at the time, gosh, I would have been what, 20 years, 19 years old, I think at the time, 19 or 20. Yeah, it would have been 20. And I remember thinking, like, what am I doing? Why am I in a situation like this? I've only been calling games for about a year, but it was a really fun growing experience that year. So I was really heavily involved with our student radio station. It was a place that I miss it in so many ways because of the freedom that we had. We basically were just a bunch of friends who would show up. We would go from talking baseball in the radio station to then going and calling a game that night. And I call the first sport I actually did was hockey. We called club hockey games, which is true love of the game. If you're at a club hockey game, fan, player, broadcaster, true love of the game right there. It was very different from the Division I baseball facility that we were calling games at, but I loved hockey. So I did hockey first and then really moved into baseball a lot with the team, but with the radio station. But that's something. It was such a great experience getting those opportunities. Also did women's basketball. I'm trying to think what else we had, but we had a couple of fun sports that we got the opportunity to call. Soccer was the other one. That was a lot of fun going soccer and a different challenge too. But it was neat to get a ton of different ones. Like I knew coming into our radio station, I was like, I want to call baseball. I want to do whatever it takes to call baseball. But I remember also thinking, hey, it might be kind of fun to try these other sports out. And I'm so glad I did because it is just like what they talk about with kids today, how it's not good to just specialize in playing one sport. It's good to play lots of different sports. I felt the same way with broadcasting. Like it's really good to be able to call different sports because it weirdly helps you out a lot in the one that maybe you're the most focused on.
Yeah, and I know you have a big baseball background, and so, talking about that, I mean, how much are you trying to now expand into other sports, or do you just mostly want to stick to baseball and hockey?
I always tell people I'm open to opportunities. I really enjoy these two. I really love baseball and hockey. Hockey is it's so different from baseball. And I always tell people that the bigger adjustment is going from baseball season into hockey season because with hockey, I do prep a lot for hockey, but I don't prep anywhere near as much for hockey as I do for baseball. Because for baseball, you have known stoppages in the game. You know that after each pitch that isn't put into play, you're going to kind of have a second or two before the next one is going to come. So you have to have either something to say or a way that you're preparing to give a little bit of silence in the moment. But what I love with hockey is that it's go go go. There are the stoppages in play, but they're unexpected. And frankly, when they come, half the time you need them. But the biggest challenge with hockey is jersey numbers early on. You don't rely on that in baseball because baseball you can be prepared. You know who's coming up to hit. They're going to announce it every time. You can write down on your score sheet already who's in the field, so you know where the ball's going. Those first hockey games of the season are the toughest. And I have gotten asked a couple of times the last couple of years, oh, hey, those are just preseason. You can miss those ones, right? And I'm like, absolutely not. Those are those are what I like to get my errors and my goof ups out of the way because the team here at Lincoln in the preseason, we do not wear our game jerseys. We wear practice jerseys, which is a real bummer because they have the number on the back but they don't have it on the shoulders. And you might wonder at first, okay, that's not that huge a deal. It's not that big on the shoulders. It's unbelievable how many times seeing a guy's number on their shoulders saves you with a hockey broadcast. And also in preseason, they don't have their names on the back. So the preseason is an absolute challenge, especially with it being a lot of new players. But it's a fun challenge because you need that. You need to grow that way of just knowing the numbers, repetitiveness of it, seeing guys over and over, and then the fun part is by the end of October, I've got our team memorized. So I don't have to worry about that. But it's the away teams, it's easier to work them in once you know your own team. My first game in Lincoln was a preseason game. We did 4 preseason games in the fall of 2022. I remember getting ready to broadcast it and being really nervous because there was only one player in the game who I had ever seen play before. And it was the year before when I was in Iowa. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, this could be really ugly because I don't know any of these numbers. I've never called a game at this location. I'm not situated at center ice. I'm even with the goal line in the left corner. I was like, this could be rough. And it ended up going better than I expected. It took, I remember, a period or two, but I was so glad that preseason that we jammed in 4 preseason games in a week because I had some doubts. I remember that week where I was going like, hey, do I know what I'm doing here? Am I in the, is this, am I over my head? Is this too fast or am I bad? And then I just remember the first game of the season, the guys had the regular jerseys on and our team scored about 10 seconds in. And it was one of those moments where I just remember being glad about how the call went. And I kind of just knew right there. I was like, okay, it's going to be okay now. Like, you just had to get a few games under you and get that confidence in.
The things about having Joel on is that he's got that hockey experience, which we haven't had a lot of. Certainly myself, or then secondly, a lot of our guests have called about every other sport, I think, but hockey. And so in saying that, I think one of the biggest challenges that I'm guessing in the broadcast booth is kind of keeping up with the puck and stuff. And then on top of that, just wondering, like, how do you prepare for a hockey game? What are the kind of things that you like to have for preparation going in?
It's like I said, hockey is so different where there aren't as many stoppages. But what I like to do, I really like to try and have at least one note on every single player on the who is on their roster. I may use them all, I may not. Honestly. I may not use half of them some nights, but I like to just have a little tidbit. And especially right now where we're about to be in the early stages of the season, a big thing that I rely on is where did this guy play last year? Was he playing high school hockey? Was he playing AAA hockey? Was he in our league in the USHL, or was he in maybe another junior hockey league? I like this because the biggest thing early on that I learned with our fans is, they just want to know, like, hey, who is this guy? What do I need to know about him with our team? How's he going to help us out? So I like to be saying stuff like, okay, he had a huge year last year. He's 17 years old. He did this at the 16U AAA level while also splitting the season at the high school level. And that way it just kind of gives them a little bit of info. They're not going to have it memorized, but, just me sliding in something like, saying like a guy brings it up the right wing wall, 13 goals for him in 23 games last year. Then he passes across ice. Like, there's moments that where to work in the stuff with information with hockey because I think if you're just doing the play by play, if you're just doing, skates up the right side, passes to his left, gets it back, now sits into the corner. It's good to do, but it's fun when you can comfortably slide in that little bit of information of, hey, this guy stands 6'8", by the way. Like something as if you're listening on radio, you'd want to know if he's a huge presence on the ice. So I try to I try to have that because I call hockey just like baseball. I call it by myself. So, and you know how that is, Patrick, where it's like you have to be your own color commentator sometimes. You have to add those details and kind of fill in the lines a little bit of that information that maybe they can't see or they don't know or are curious about over the course of a broadcast. So my biggest thing, like I mentioned in the prep, is I try to get at least one detail on each guy. I love to have key team information. What kind of streak are they on? Whether they've won 5 in a row or they've dropped 8 of the last 11 or so. What's their power play? What's the penalty kill? Where's this team rank in terms of goals scored and goals given up? There aren't as many statistics in hockey as there are baseball, and I'm an absolute stats geek. Anyone who knows me knows that. Our coaching staff here with the Stars has called me that before. They called me the stats guy. I love stats, but unfortunately with hockey, there aren't as many. So sometimes I like to drift a little bit into the advanced statistics, but I try not to do too much because I don't want to confuse a listener. But I get into those because I asked our coaching staff one year if I could just have access to the advanced statistics that they have. So something I would like to do is be like, hey, this guy's goals for per game or per 60, so to speak, would be X amount of goals. I like to do that, and then I like to try to explain it real quickly afterwards. But I don't like to give stats to pat myself on the back for knowing what they are. I like to say them to add a little color or to back up an opinion. Maybe like I could say something like, "Hey, he's been on a roll recently. He's been he's been the reason this team keeps winning." And then I could also add in 2 goals or less given up in 30 of 38 starts, right? Like that supplements that point and that adds the color to the broadcast as well. So, it's Where baseball, I spend pretty much all day prepping and some for a broadcast, and I'll pretty much use about everything that I use. With hockey, I still prep all day, but most of it is knowing that, hey, this might not get used at all, or hey, I might actually have to slide in this statistic in an unexpected way.
Yeah, and I know, so it's interesting in hockey where you talked about the pace, and obviously it's a lot more fast-paced and you don't have as much time to tell the stories. So, how much do you, um, like on the baseball side, try to gather more stories, and are you going to put more notes for each player? Or how does that, break down for you when you're going into one of those games?
Oh, absolutely. Baseball to me, half of the enjoyment, not in a bad way, is that I joke that it's story time, especially if a game gets bad. You have a game where you're losing by 10 runs. I don't mind drifting away from the game. You can still give the important details. Here's the 2-1 pitch, one gone grounded to the left side, flip the first, that'll retire the side. That's important, but to me, especially if it's about seventh inning on and the game's out of reach, you're there to keep the listener, whether you're winning, whether you're losing. If you're winning, you love to ride the high in the moment. Hey, this is the 10th time this season that we have scored 15 or more runs. But if you're losing, maybe it's a funky play in the field and maybe it reminds you of something else. I remember, I think one time there was a play like that where it was like a hard ground ball to the left side, kind of popped off the ground and up in the air. And I called it a Baltimore chop, which it is in the moment. But then I remember the next stoppage and play I got, I actually explained what a Baltimore chop was, just so like people could actually understand, so to speak. So I like to do that a lot of it because I love the sport of hockey, and I think it's one that I really know really well. But I have a really different love of baseball, where I love so much about the history of the game. I have such a passion for the sport that I love to take those moments to kind of just maybe explain a phrase that I use. I had one time someone asked me, I said that a runner was in a pickle because he was kind of caught in a rundown between first and second. And someone asked me, they're like, what the heck did that mean? You keep saying that someone was in a pickle. And I was like, wow, he was just kind of in a jam there, like he was caught between first and second and he was in trouble. And it was fun to explain that. But I also realized how many things that I say just casually over the course of a baseball broadcast that I don't think twice about, but a listener might have no clue what I was just saying. So that's the beauty of baseball is that you have time to explain stuff. You have time to tell stories from that season or the history of your club, stuff like that. So I like that even in the tough games because one of the things I'll really do a lot in tough games is I'll try to see if there's a trend. Where and late in the season I was doing this for us. Like we had a couple of tough losses. Well, I think it was our last road trip of the season. We were heading right into the playoffs, and I brought up how a consistent theme for this team that could cost them a championship has been their pitching. I said, we've given up. I think at the time I said something like we've given up at least 6 runs in a game in 5 of the last 8, and we've won, fortunately, 5 of those games. But you can tell that it's made for some strange contests. So it's that moment where you're almost being the fan a little bit, or you're being the voice of the fan, where you're saying like, "Hey, this is something that we have to be better at." And I keep saying we. By the way, when we're talking, I don't ever say we on the broadcast. I'm not. I don't like when teams do that. I know a lot of college football broadcasters will say we. I say we off air a lot, never on air because while you and we work for these teams, I don't think it's our place to pretend that we're on them by any means.
Yeah, that is one thing that's always a little bit interesting to watch. Some guys will be more into it than others, and so on the point of the stories, like I know in baseball, getting those stories can be part of what's a task for you throughout the season, like off the air. So, what's your best ways for getting stories on players and also those that can be definitely shared out to the public and is not something that, has to stay behind closed doors or like is just too, I guess, I don't know, controversial or something like that to be put on the air. And so how do you go about managing all those relationships?
I think the biggest way that you can do that is simply just talking to people. My favorite thing about baseball season isn't even broadcasting games. I love batting practice. I tell people that the thing that I miss the most when baseball season ends is I miss sitting out in the sun watching batting practice, talking to players. And sometimes, you're just saying like, "Hey, how's it going, James?" or something. Other times it's, you kind of come up to a guy and it's like, "Hey, you're a switch hitter. Which side do you actually like hitting on a little bit more?" And the fun thing with it is as you gain guys' trust, and then you kind of know that, hey, Joel's literally just here to hang out, and you're just talking. As you gain their trust, you really get to hear some more insight, and they'll open up a little bit more each time. That I make a point in baseball season that every time it's a new player, especially hitters, I really like to go out of my way to say, "Hey, I'm Joel, by the way. I do the broadcasting." And obviously, if it's a tough name, to say, "Hey, did I get your name right, by the way, or is this how I think I should say it?" But I really like to just talk to guys down there because the more you're around them and the more you're just part of the everyday process, which baseball is in so many ways, the more you'll hear from them. And I had, several routines with certain guys. I see them and you do the same thing every day. And it was a lot of fun to do that, to get to know them, but then I also get some insight. Maybe I'm talking to a guy like Max Hartman one day and he's telling me, "Hey, my family's in attendance today as well." And you can say, "Hey, well, that's really cool. What's your parents' name?" So I can shout them out later on or something. Or I had a couple times players who tell me, "Hey, my parents or my grandparents listen back home all the time to you," and I say, "Okay, well, what's their name? I'd love to shout them out on the broadcast or something." So I love that aspect of just being able to just sit and talk with them. And that goes for coaches too, by the way. It was a daily ritual that I would pretty much go to our head coach every single day of batting practice, and we would talk about, "Hey, who got up in the pen today? Who can I expect to see? What are you expecting out of today's starter? Hey, we've got a new second baseman. What do you like about him? This guy's been bouncing in and out of shortstop. Do you think he's got what it takes?" Just that simple conversation with guys, so that I can say on the broadcast later on, head coach Mitch Darlington is leaning on using so and so tonight, and it's not me just guessing. It's me knowing because I had a conversation with him here, and he hasn't BS'd me yet because usually it's worked out with what we've talked about. So I enjoyed that so much, where you feel like you have that inside edge, where it's like, "Hey, I have got a really good pulse for what this team is doing." And not only that does it help me as a broadcaster, but with our home games, it helps other people around me. Like, as I sit next to our scorekeeper, so I'll tell him before games, "Hey, it looks like we've got Canfield, Bonson, and a couple other guys who might be out of the bullpen tonight. Like, so the thought is we're going to go to this guy first." So that way they just can be a little bit more prepared as well.
Yeah, do you have any some of the top few stories from Wenatchee this season?
Oh boy, trying to think of what would be the best one. We have such a good team dynamic where it's a very players driven organization. Our coaching staff is so big on that, and it's so fun the way we're so big on, like, "Hey, let's have fun playing, but as long as we're winning the games, that's what matters the most." We had one story, and this wasn't even at the field. I'll tell you this one. Um, we had an off day, an unexpected off day on the road. We had just played 3 games in Edmonton, and I don't know if you have gone up to Edmonton yet in your 2 years. Have you?
No, unfortunately we didn't go.
It's a fun trip. It's a long trip. So what we do for Edmonton, we drove up to Kelowna. So we got across the border. You go through customs, get into Kelowna, flew out of Kelowna to Edmonton, flew back from Edmonton to Kelowna. And the nice thing was we played on a Sunday and we got in very late on that Sunday night. And we were going to play the next day. But we woke up and it started raining, and Kelowna bagged the game at about 2 o'clock. They said, "All right, it's not going to happen. We'll play a doubleheader tomorrow." Well, the weather got better, as it naturally, of course, does. And by about 6 o'clock, it was pretty nice out. So our coaching staff and I said, "Hey, you know what? Let's go golfing. We're on the road. This is something we talked about doing all year." So we went out. We played 9 holes, and a couple of our players came out as well, and they finished before us. And they got done, and they kind of circled back on their carts, and they were watching the coaches and I swinging, and they're chirping from afar. And we get to our last hole, and it was a scramble, so we're playing best ball. And it was a par three. I had a good tee shot that went off, and I got it to the edge of the green. Well, we get up to the green, and one of our pitchers, Quincy Vassar, comes up to me and he goes, "All right, Joe, you make this putt here. I'll come on a broadcast with you during a game one of these next couple of days." And it was a pretty long putt, but I ended up making it. I was pretty excited. So he's like, "All right, I guess the deal's a deal." So then the next day, he came on the broadcast with me for a couple of innings. It was a really, really warm day in Kelowna, and we were in between innings, and we're on a commercial break, and I told him, "Hey, unplug the white cord under there. I want to plug the fan back in. I want to make sure that it's we're getting some airflow in here again." He goes, "White cord?" I go, "Yep." He goes down, unplugs the white cord, and unplugs our power. Now, I had forgotten we had two power strips that were white underneath the table, and unfortunately he got the one, and I didn't tell him more specifically not to touch. So we come back on air, and our starting pitcher in the fifth inning had already struck out the first two batters. We completely missed those. So we're in the middle of getting back on and joking with about that, and he strikes out the third one, and we're like, all right, well that's the inning. You missed it, but it was a 1, 2, 3 up, 3 down on 3 strikeouts inning. And I just remember Quincy saying, "Okay, well let me get out of the way. I've caused enough damage here." So it was kind of fun having that kind of connection with a player where you were comfortable enough to do stuff like that. But that was probably my favorite story, just with the player interaction from the season.
Well, I think it's always interesting the stories that come out of baseball, Joel, but I'm wondering, in hockey, like, do you have that kind of same easy relationship with the guys, and do they behave somewhat similar to the baseball teams?
It's similar age groups in a lot of ways. The hockey players for us, you're eligible from 16 through 20 years old. Now, as long as your 21st birthday isn't before January 1st of that season, you can be 21 and playing in the league. Like if your birthday is January 15th or so, you're eligible and you're 21, you're eligible to play. But it's a little different in a lot of ways because I have with hockey, we play about typically twice a week. So I have all week in a lot of ways to talk with these guys, but there aren't necessarily those huge opportunities the way that there are for baseball. Like there isn't a daily batting practice. But with hockey, one of the things I tried to find for a way to just talk with guys was just chat with them after practice. Maybe it's a quick interview after a Tuesday or a Wednesday morning skate, and just knowing the routine of the group. And but also part of it's like what I talked about with baseball, where I like to just I really early on I like to make a point when a guy comes into town. I like to be able to say, "Hey, I'm Joel, by the way. Just I know who you are already, but just introducing myself to you." With hockey, I really like to do that. Like I like to just hang around after practices. They get off the ice, and it's just maybe it's a quick fist bump. "Hey, how's it going? How are you doing?" And just and then as I know them a little bit better, addressing them by name each time, saying, "Hey, Blake, how are you? Jack, good to see you, dude." Just stuff like that, so that it builds that trust factor where these kids for both baseball and hockey with the leagues I'm in, they're in such an interesting spot because for the most part, they're playing in places that they're not fully comfortable. That might be a returning player. They might have been there before, but for the most part, it's guys coming in for the first time to a place. And they're trying to remember their teammates' names and they're trying to remember their coaches' names and their billet parents and everything. But I try to just be that simple, like, hey, I work here too. I'm around you guys a lot. I'm going to ask you for interviews. Just knowing that I'm on your side as well with the team. So there aren't as many really besides after practices chances. I don't know if we will this year, but the last couple of years we did a radio show where every like Tuesday night I would do a coach's show for a half hour. I talk with our coach about the team, and then the next half hour I'd usually bring on two players and we talk about stuff on the ice and stuff off of the ice. So there's a long period of time where I get to know the players in hockey season, where by the end of the season in April or May, I know them. I feel like I know them really well. And we have a couple of guys this year who are going into their third straight season with the team. And those are guys who I've only known since I've been here. So it's really funny how well I know them and how I can. And it's fun to refer back to previous seasons with them because I'll remember specific plays and I've been blessed with a really really good and specific memory in terms of sports. So I enjoy those aspects where you're around guys a lot. They get to know you. They know that hey, he's around. He usually just needs to do an interview or something, but he's also just there to talk too and just be a human being as well.
Yeah, I know it's definitely a little bit different in hockey as far as I imagine the access and stuff, and also the fact that you can't really necessarily be on the ice while guys are
Yeah.
skating, or it's a little bit tougher. So, and saying that though, do you have any announcers that you looked up to or you think do things really well on the hockey side?
I think for a lot of people, it's hard not to think about the people you listen to growing up. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I was a really, really big Penguins fan. I was blessed to get an internship with them for 1 year. So I really pull from two guys in Penguins history. Mike Lang, we used to be the radio broadcaster for the team. I have my first bobblehead I ever got was a talking Mike Lang bobblehead. And it was just, he had some just goofy phrases, but it was fun. And that was part of your experience following the team. So I always enjoyed listening to him. And then I interned for the Penguins in the 2017-18 season with the radio network. And more than anything I did with them, the best experience I got from it was pretty much working with who is now their TV play-by-play broadcaster every day, was just seeing how he went about his business, hearing him on air every single day, hearing the way that he prepared for games and the little steps he took to be ready to go each day. I learned so much from him just about his professionalism, just seeing him go about his business, that I found myself doing a lot of that stuff as I listen to him call games. And I think we have different styles, but I see the way he weaves and stuff. And I remember how I saw how he prepared stuff for a full season. And I realized I've done a lot of that too. I have a lot of those habits. So, and his name's Josh Getzoff. So I learned so much from those two people. One, from just growing up listening to them all the time, and then two, working for one of them for a year and just seeing a professional go about his routine. So those are the two. I don't think anyone who's currently between the ages of at least 22 and probably 35 would say that they weren't inspired by Doc Emmerich. I think all of us still find a way to pull in a word that he used. I find myself sometimes saying that a player pitchforked the puck up the wall or something. Doc was one of those voices that if you didn't love hockey, listening to him call a game, I don't think you have a soul, because that guy had such a genuine love for the sport, genuine enthusiasm. I remember listening to him for so many years and thinking, man, if I ever get a call hockey at a high enough level, I hope that I can make someone realize how insane this game is right now and hectic a certain playoff or even a regular season type game is. And that's something that now, when I'm calling a 1 goal game or a scoreless game or even a 2 goal game, playoffs or regular season, I think back to the stuff that stood out that I heard Doc Emmerich do growing up, where it was the way that he would say the score and the time remaining in the game. You know, 2-1 with 3:27 to go in the third. It was the urgency of here's me getting you the information really fast, but also I'm saying this fast because I'm also letting you know there's not a lot of time left and it's moving really fast, and you need to live and die with every word I'm saying right now. He could have made a game between two last place teams interesting. Now, working for NBC, he never had to worry about that because they were going to get the premier games. But I just kept thinking about how that guy has such a great voice for making any game feel like it is game seven of the Stanley Cup final. And I always thought, boy, I want to know how to harness that ability with the right regular season game, the right postseason game. And again, there are definitely games you do not need to make feel like game seven of the Stanley Cup final. Preseason games here this week are not meant to be that way. It is not life and death when you win and lose those, but also the urgency and the excitement of the big moments, finding a way to get those across. When a guy scores his first goal, in a big spot, like you let loose in that moment. You let people know, hey, this is so cool. And we had something like that last year in the playoffs where we had won game one of our best of three series, and then in game two, we had a kid who had I don't even think he was 17 yet. I think he was still 16. He scored his first goal of the year and scored it all in the regular season. He had split time with our USHL team and a AAA team. So he was kind of a fringe player, but here he was scoring a huge goal in a big spot. And I remember listening back to my call, and I was like, you could tell, if you knew me, you could tell how excited I was for him because I had talked to him all year. I had seen the frustrations for him in those moments of, boy, I don't know if I'm getting enough playing time, or I'm doing really well here, but it's not making a difference there yet. And I thought that was something where I was like, I'm glad that I was able to express that joy in the moment because I wanted the listener to understand that, okay, yeah, maybe this isn't the star player of our team, but you should be excited for this guy too, because he has still been here all year and he hasn't necessarily gotten this moment in the spotlight yet. So those are, long story short, though, that's the type of stuff I think I've learned from a lot of those guys who I really liked followed in Mike Lang, Josh Getzoff, and Doc Emmer.
I know there's a lot of inspirational voices and certainly those in baseball too. And so, you talked about just kind of the excitement of the game and how well they can do that. And I'm wondering, how do you, just on the fundamental side, keep up with, when a guy's subbing in and out, or do you also have interesting things like, verbiage charts and stuff that you might have in baseball? And how many, I guess, different sheets of paper can you keep in front of you at one time while you're doing a game?
That's an interesting question. So in hockey, I really like to have, boy, I probably have about, well, that's a tough question because I have my iPad, which I use my iPad. Well, sometimes I have two iPads and my computer and then printed out papers. I have this weird little routine with how I do stuff with both sports where a lot of the, the league statistics that I would need to know, standings, where teams rank in terms of power play, situational things. I have that on my computer, weirdly. Um, I use one iPad to control audio. I run my own broadcast. I don't know. Do you use Mixler in the summer with Ridgefield?
Ridgefield, we were using but to record like as far as audio only, and then we had YouTube for home games.
Yeah. So with hockey, we're on Mixler for radio, and our broadcast itself, like the video is on Flow Sports. So I basically have a cord I plug into my board and I connect that to our Flow Sports computer. So whatever I send in my board itself goes over there. So I am my own board operator, similar to what you would be then. Whereas in baseball, I'm on radio, so I have a board operator and he cues me in and out of breaks. So I don't have as much to control there. But with hockey, I'm fully controlling the broadcast. So I have a separate iPad that controls like my commercials in between, stoppages in action, intermissions. So I've got that going. But then on my iPad, I have my spot chart, which I shared with you actually last week. I have my spot chart, and then I usually have a page or two of just miscellaneous notes that I gathered. If it's a road game, a lot of times to help make the bus ride go a little bit quicker, I'll spend a lot of that working on like those miscellaneous notes of just the, hey, here's a trend I just thought of about us. We've scored first in 8 of the last 10 games. What's our record in those games when we've scored first within that span? So I'll do stuff like that. I'm one of those people who's just always, even as a fan, when I just watch a game, I'm always wondering stuff like that. Like okay, hey, we scored 4 goals in the first period. When's the last time that happened? Have we done that this season? Was it a few years ago? How many times have we scored multiple goals in a period? My mind just works that way where I have more and more questions after something happens, where sometimes I think I would be really suited for like a statistician role because I think that way. But it's something I enjoy with baseball too. But in hockey, I focus on that a lot as well. Baseball is big. We had a guy in June, he had 2 different 5-hit games for the AppleSox. And I was really proud because in the moment, I knew each time where that ranked in franchise history. His first game of the season, June 1st, he had 5 hits. And I was really proud in the moment. I was like, that's the 7th 5-hit game in AppleSox history. And then he did it again a few weeks later. I said, that's the 8th time. And, we're talking about a team that had 24 seasons and it's happened 8 times. And one guy did it twice in 2.5 weeks. So it was fun to see something like that. And it was fun to look at, hey, when's the last time this happened? How many times has it happened? That's a big part of how I prepare. But a lot of that preparation is something that you can't necessarily do all of that the day of. You can't come into a game expecting, hey, Aiden Doherty is going to go out and he's going to get 6 hits done. You have no way of being able to do that. But where that comes is your preparation before a season, where I create a media guide for the AppleSox each season. I started it in 2021. This would have been the 4th season that I had a media guide. I updated, I make changes throughout the year. The other part is your game notes. I produce daily game notes in baseball season, and I produce I guess they're kind of weekly game notes for hockey. Granted, you only have 2 games a week. There's not a ton to change after the first game. Plus, you're playing back-to-back days. You might be at home the first day. You might be on the road the next day. Travel is very different in hockey compared to baseball, where when in baseball you travel, you kind of get comfortable in a place for 3 days. Hockey, it's we played tonight, but tomorrow we might be on the road, or we're on the road tonight. We might be back at home tomorrow. To maintain my sanity and get my proper sleep, I don't fully update my game notes on back to back every single game day, but I do them each week. So I have like a page in my game notes where it's like, hey, when's the last time this happened? What's our record in these scenarios? What's our scoring total and goals allowed by period, so to speak, where I have this stuff ready and it's fun when something will happen and it's like, oh, I know where I can look and find this information right now. I know the last time that we recorded a hat trick. Okay, when's the last time we recorded a hat trick at home? And I have that information readily available. So much of that preparation, you hear broadcasters say you have to prep, you have to prep, but you also have to know how you need to know the stuff that you want to intertwine into a broadcast. Because when I was in college, I don't know that I necessarily knew how to prep, so to speak, because for 3 years of calling Division I college baseball, I got game notes handed to me pretty much every day that we showed up at the park. We were spoiled with that, where it was like, oh, okay, hey, I can look this stuff up here because it's already done for me. I went to the AppleSox and I was calling games alone, so I didn't have a color commentator. And any information basically besides general batting average and ERA and that stuff, I wasn't going to be able to necessarily find and dig deep. So I realized really late in my first year that I was like, hey, I've got to kind of start producing this information. And it's a lot of work. And I'm sure you can attest to that too. It's a lot in baseball season. You're not going to get the sleep you want. You're going to have a few days where you kind of have to will yourself into doing the work. But it's so worth it because if you don't do it by game time, a lot of days, you almost feel lost without it. The only games that I don't heavily prep for are non-league. And I think that, kind of speaks for itself if you've called enough of those games where the game's going to get out of hand. So for me, one way or another, non-league games are story time days. This guy for us is coming in, he's making his debut. Who is he? What do I need to know about him? That kind of stuff. But if it's a league game, a playoff game, it's heavy prep on all that information that goes into game notes.
I know there's a ton of, for those that aren't familiar, stuff that can go into the game notes, but those are kind of like, have so much information like Joel was talking about on the history of the team and what they've done this season, and stats and trends. And, I can, go off that as well. Like we had definitely a lot of game notes put together when I was at Miami. Like you were getting a little bit of that, but had to put some together myself in Richfield. And so, when you're responsible for looking that up and finding these interesting notes and statistics to fit into a broadcast, how difficult is that? Like at different levels, like when you're in Lincoln or Wenatchee, they might not be as sophisticated as a stat system as like Major League Baseball, for example, because obviously that's the highest level. So do you find it more difficult to find those statistics, and how do you go about doing that kind of research?
It's a really good question. I'm glad you asked it because that search for statistics is how I jokingly tell people that it's how I put my history minor that I got from college to use. I For anyone who's not super familiar, the West Coast League began using point streak in 2010. Stats before 2010 are kind of lost. That like we don't really have them. I think the Corvallis Knights have tracked theirs. I have found the AppleSox single season stats from 2000 to 2009. I've tracked down that stuff. I talked with an old scorekeeper who had them. He had kept track of them for years, and I have that information. And I eventually I put it on our website a few years ago. But that's the fun thing with my media guide that I use is I kind of am trying to kind of capture all that information in one place. Because if you go to Point Streak right now for the Apple Sox, you can find statistics from any season from 2010 to 2024. Problem is, the team played its first games in 2000 in an entirely different league. So my job I kind of took for myself was I want to have all of our stats in one place, 2000 to 2009 as well, where I had the results of every single game in that time and the results of every player's statistics, batting average, ERA, home runs, and whatnot. I was able to get a lot of help from previous scorekeepers in Wenatchee that helped me a lot. It was just a matter of me organizing everything that they had already. So that was really cool. And that one, it was work, but it was the harder part was mostly just organizing it. I'm in the middle of a project here in Lincoln where I'm trying to find something similar. I know I'm a little rusty because I haven't been looking at it since April, but I'll be kind of getting back into this soon. Our statistics for the USHL, yeah, that's right. They only start being available on the league website in 2002. Now, the Lincoln Stars, the hockey team I'm with, they began play in 1996. So in 2002, USA Hockey deemed the United States Hockey League a tier one level league of junior hockey. But for whatever reason, those stats before then are not available. I have I have gone on to find stats, to verify stats by doing the tedious work of not quite microfilm, but I guess the modern 21st century equivalent, newspapers.com, going back and reading individual articles. And one of my fun tasks in the winter, and I'm sure a lot of people don't find this fun. I really enjoyed this. I enjoyed going back in newspapers, finding that season's schedule for the team, and then tracking every single game's result. Looking back at, here's the newspaper recap of this game. Here's the newspaper recap of that. So I really have been doing that, and I don't know if I'm quite ready to do it this year, but I'm hoping maybe next season to be able to release a media guide with every single season's statistics for players and every single season's schedule and results. Which again, for a lot of the years where the stats are available online, it's easier, but it's fun tracking those previous seasons. I kind of jokingly call them the lost seasons because they've been lost to time. They're not readily available to the general fan. So I really like taking on that role of a borderline team historian as well because I know that that stuff matters to people. Because if it matters to me, there's going to be someone else who's going to be interested in it. So a lot of that work is tedious, but again, it's kind of the beauty of the off season because I told you with the AppleSox, I started out as I did the broadcasting in 2018 and 19, and then I was a salesperson the rest of the year. But one of the tasks I got assigned after my first season was to write a book on the team's first 20 seasons. And as I was clawing for information for that book, I found myself getting really invested in team history, but also being curious about some of these big moments. And that's been one of the funny things in recent years that players with the AppleSox, they come to the team, they talk to people, and they learn really quickly like how much I know with the team history. I was talking about one of our pitchers before, Quincy Vassar, and our joke about with golf and everything. One of the things he and another one of our pitchers, Evan Canfield, were talking to me about before the start of the season. They were really curious. They're like, Joel, we've been here a couple of years. Where do we rank in team history in terms of strikeouts? And it was funny because once I looked it all up, I did the research, I saw where they were at. It was funny to be like, hey, you guys both have a chance to make some team history this season. This is your third year with the team, and it did end up happening. Quincy Vassar became our all-time leader in strikeouts, and it was so cool because it was a mix of something I was interested in that you could be saying okay, it's just a statistic Joel really likes and is finding cool, but it was a combination of that and something that mattered to the players. Like there's some guys for summer ball, and you probably experienced this. Summer ball might not be a huge deal. It's the oh cool, I broke this record with your team, whatever. For a guy like Quincy, it meant a lot because he grew up not far from Wenatchee, and holding a record like that meant a lot because he knew a lot of people who played for the team. Some of those people on the leader chart he was passing were like really good family friends. So when he set the record, he had a really exciting celebration on the field. And it was kind of cool because in the moment you're like, okay, this is a summer ball team record. But then you see the guys celebrating and you're like, no, this means a little bit more because this is a 24 season franchise. And this is a guy who's passing of several other people who pitched for a while, and again, several people who he knew. So no, this does mean something. So it's fun when the work with statistics that I do. It's neat when you see that it has an effect on people because that is what motivates me, I think, the most to look into it is to elevate the players who are with you right now who are looking to chase history, but also elevate the people who maybe you didn't even see before and kind of give them their fair due for what they've accomplished. Maybe in hockey it's the guy who had 70 goals over 3 seasons with the team or something like that. Or in baseball, it's the guy we had an instance this year where Aiden Doherty led the league in batting average at 380, and it actually was tied for our record for a player in AppleSox history who appeared in at least 40 games. And it's okay. Well, he's tying the record. Who was that other guy? What did let's give him his fair due as well because he deserves this moment in the spotlight that maybe he didn't realize at the time was going to be a really big moment in franchise history.
Yeah, that's all great, background in terms of getting into the statistical side and something that, I've definitely thought about as well, like getting into that. And it's hard to keep in mind almost as you're doing a game, like how many statistics can get thrown
Yeah.
into the mix. But, going like forward and we can sit here all day, I know, and talk about the stats, but what are your specific goals in broadcasting and, how would you say you see yourself like in 5 years?
That's a good question. I always like to tell people if you're going to ask what the specific endpoint would be, what the dream job would be, hands down, it would be heading back home. I would love to be the broadcaster for the Pittsburgh Pirates someday. There's no question. And that would be something if I was ever fortunate enough, I would probably never, opportunity to live back home with the team. I grew up seeing about at least 15 times a summer in person. Like that would be it. And life would kind of be set from that point on. But honestly, even just 5 years, I hope that I'm just in a position where I'm with a baseball team, whatever level it is. I'm in a base with a baseball team or even a hockey team with people that I respect. I love working with. I feel a connection with. I feel like it's a team effort from top to bottom, whether it's the coaching staff, the players, the front office, the stadium workers. I just want something like that because there's something so there's something so exciting about being part of a team where I was never a spectacular athlete. In fact, I was probably a very below average athlete. But I love the aspect of being with the team and being with people who are trying to improve every single day. Because one of my favorite things with the AppleSox is I feel like I'm weirdly intertwined in every conversation. And they'll ask, hey, you want to be included this? And I keep thinking, I'm like, the heck does sales have to do with my position? What the heck does your decisions on the field for who you're going to deploy in the eighth or ninth inning matter at all? But it's fun to be able to see that people respect you enough. And it's also, great to be able to respect your coworkers enough. I What I love about broadcasting, Patrick, is that you don't necessarily have any coworkers, so to speak, where you're kind of on your own. You have people you interact with, but I don't really have anyone I necessarily maybe my board operator back at our radio station. But beyond that, I don't have people who are like, hey, I'm relying on you to be able to do my job. And I like that. I like just being able to kind of work on my own. But I also love having other people that I interact at a job where I can say, hey, talking to a coach is a huge part of my day and my preparation for this job. It's not a must, but it is an important aspect. So I can see in his mind what he wants to do today. Talking to the players is a big aspect because then I feel like I get a little more insight on them. I might understand why this guy likes to put down the drag bunt in these counts or why this guy doesn't like the swing of the first pitch of an at bat. That's color. Again, that's being your own color commentator and having that information available. But it is handy to have the right people around you. And I think that's going back to your question where I'd like to be in 5 years. I hope that I'm in that type of situation where whatever state, whatever team I might be with, that I can say, hey, this is a team that I have a ton of pride working for because of our overall goal to win a championship, but also to just do things the right way.
That's a good message, and I think you'll definitely get to that dream point if you can just keep up the work at it. And you never know how things could break down in the future. You just have to continue to plug away. And certainly, Joel, you've been an amazing guest to have on, and really gave us so much insight into hockey, which we haven't had that perspective before, and then baseball. And never get enough of that, especially as MLB season's going right into that pennant race time, and it'll get real exciting. So. Again, Joel, thank you so much for your time. Eventually, I'm going to have to meet you on the broadcast circuit. Obviously, it was a good year for, I know us in Richfield and you as well in Wenatchee and the West Coast League, but I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Patrick. Again, at some point we'll get a chance to meet here, but a lot of fun chatting.
Yeah, thank you.